tell me please, how old were you when you started working with a knife?
I began training informally with the knife about age 13 and formal instruction at about age 18.
What actually pushed you to start working with a knife?
You know, the knife always fascinated me as a weapon. It was something that seemed very practical and something that I could carry with me. It was not like a traditional weapon, like a staff or a sword that I could not carry with me. And I also just had a love with the knife. It was just something that resonated with me.
Mr. Vargas, can you tell me please about your own system?
Well, my system, we call it the Way of the Raven blade system, and it is a combination of everything that I've trained in knife up until this point, basically what I found to be useful and what I found enjoyment in working. It is a combination of all of my studies. Our base, our foundation is primarily Native American knife work, and we have a lot of influences from European and Western military knife work as well. There's some smaller influences from Southeast Asian arts such as Ali and Silat, but primarily it is based on Native American, European, and Western military knife. So the system focuses on, we try to focus on all ranges, close, medium, and long range, and we try to look at all facets of the knife. Different ranges like grappling range, we look at trapping range, and look at other elements like takedowns, things like that that a lot of knife systems don't cover. We try to be very comprehensive and offer skills in all of these different aspects of knife work.
Do you have any logical model in your system?
Okay, well, we try to focus on the correct tools and tactics for the situation. Knife work is like it's like dance. There's a lot of different forms of knife work, just like there's a lot of different forms of dance. You can learn ballet, you can learn breakdancing, and some things are going to be appropriate in some situations. If you go to a party at a disco, you don't want to dance ballet, but there may be times when you need to use one method or another. So we try to look at the scenario first, and then decide what the tools and the tactics are that are appropriate for that scenario.
Mr. Vargas, do you have some certain methodology of preparing working with a knife? How does it look?
Well, to prepare students to work with the knife, we focus on two primary things. The first is physical fundamentals. You have to have the correct fundamentals physically, all of the mechanics, understanding how the blade works, understanding how the body moves, and what the appropriate and correct, physical applications are. The second one is the psychology. We have to look at the psychology of using a weapon like the knife, a psychology of violence, a psychology of being able to function under that level of stress. So without those two foundations, nothing else that you do is ever going to be functional.
Mr. Vargas, could you mind sharing with me, do you have any certain principles in your system? What first do you pay attention to?
Yes. Two of the primary things that we like to focus on are using correct time. And what I mean is applying technique that fit in the correct amount of time given the scenario and the situation. You see a lot of martial art, a lot of knife work where the attacker and the defender are working at very different time intervals, and that can create very unrealistic training scenarios for you. So we want to focus on doing things in proper timing to make sure that they function correctly in real time. The other thing that we like to focus on, and that is a cornerstone of what our method is movement. We need to have movement. We focus on movement, especially for defense, more so than blocking or checking. So we try to train the students to understand proper movement, for defensive purposes to be able to avoid blows, and also to use movement correctly to set up their offense. So movement and timing, two of the major principles that we try to adhere to.
Mr. Vargas, can you tell me please what kind of advantages your system has?
Well, there's a lot of wonderful benefits to any system, and if there's anything that our system might be good at, is being very aware of distance and being very aware of timing. One of the things that I see from a lot of knife instructors, they are very good at drills. They're very good, with their hands, but their distance is to their detriment. They sometimes don't apply the correct distance and don't understand how timing and movement factor into maintaining and acquiring the distance that you want for either attack or defense. So I think that would be one thing where a student would find a lot of instruction in that area in our system, where maybe not so much in other systems. Okay, I don't believe that our system is better than other systems. We may focus on things more than others do, but there's something to learn from every system. That's why my system is a combination, because I've learned important lessons from many different teachers from many different traditions. In our system, one thing that is important that we really try to focus on is strategy. Strategy is key, I think, to success. A lot of systems are very reactive when it comes to the weapon. They train to respond to the attacker's motion, and that has its place. But I don't believe that any engagement can really be won unless you are being proactive. So we really try to have the students think in a very proactive manner. If they must be reactive initially to defend themselves when things first jump off and first start, they can do that, and then they have to be conscious to change their mindset to an offensive mindset, to a proactive mindset. Now, when I say proactive, I don't mean that they have to be making strikes and cuts and thrusts, be offensive physically. You can be proactive using strategy. You can start to turn things in your favor, not necessarily by cutting at somebody, but by moving a certain way to invite the opponent to come in to a certain attack, so that you can kind of have a plan and be one step ahead of the opponent. You can use your strategy to be proactive and create a barrier between you and the adversary, so that you have a greater margin of safety. You can be proactive by starting to identify exits in the room and how you can safely get to that exit and avoid further attack. So when I say proactive, it's very much about looking at the total scenario and being able to make decisions that are going to better ensure your safety, instead of constantly reacting to the opponent's attacks.
Mr. Vargas, do you have some strategy and tactics in your system?
Well, the strategy that we try to use is to constantly find a beneficial place for the practitioner. So I will try to teach students to be proactive and find better position, find better distance, find a better angle. They want to be doing that proactively instead of being reactive. So that's one of the things. The second thing that is important is from a point of view of strategy is using deception and trickery. We like to use as much as we can, whether it be physical trickery or using psychological trickery. We want to use that deception to work in our favor. We want to offset the opponent psychologically. We want to take advantage. We want to feign weakness when we're strong. We want to feign, strength when we're weak. Anything that we can do to get into the mind of the opponent is going to be beneficial. Apart from good foundational, functional basics, the strategy is what really makes any system, successful.
Mr. Vargas, can you tell your opinion? Does it important to have psychological preparation before starting to work with a knife?
Absolutely. Psychological preparation is probably the single most important thing that you need to have before working with a blade. You can do it for a hobby. You can do it for recreation without psychological preparation. But you have to understand that your blade will never function outside of a training hall if you don't prepare psychologically. Cutting somebody, stabbing somebody is very difficult to the psyche. People have a natural aversion to want to do that kind of violence to other people. It's much easier psychologically to shoot a gun or to swing a stick at somebody else. But piercing another person's body or cutting another person's body is very counterintuitive to what human beings are psychologically. So the student has to do a lot of preparation. They have to seek out, within themselves, if morally they're able to do this, and make some type of agreement with themselves that they are willing to take this step and use this type of technique. To develop it, you want to use a lot of creative visualization, run scenarios through your mind where you are actually doing these things to somebody else, and defensible person. In the classroom, you want to use different drills to simulate reality as much as possible. Something simple like using weapons that look real, shiny, metal trainers rather than plastic trainer or wooden trainer. You can use things like stage blood. You can do a lot of different things to create stressors and stimulate the stress of a real encounter. But again, that agreement with yourself and then accepting of what you're going to do, once you've really given it a lot of thought and really understand what it entails, is the most important step in preparing to use a blade.
Mr. Vargas, how do you think? Why people decide to start working with a knife?
I think people recognize that the blade is a very good equalizer. I think that it's very clear that knives are something that you can use to protect yourself. Even somebody that's very small, somebody that's older, maybe has some type of, disability or other type of limitation, can all use a knife to help equalize, the scenario when faced with an attacker that wants to hurt you. The knife also is very accessible. You can find a knife in any kitchen, anywhere in the world. There's not a lot of restrictions as far as purchasing knives, the way there are restrictions against purchasing firearms or carrying firearms. So while a lot of people, I think, would like to carry, a firearm for self-defense purposes, in a lot of parts of the world, even in parts of the United States, that's very difficult to do. So it's easier for people to access knives. Again, a knife does not take a lot of training to be able to use for basic self-defense. You can learn the fundamentals in 1 or 2 afternoons of training. So I think those are some of the reasons why knives are attractive to people, why they want to pick up that weapon and start working with it.
Does it important for you what kind of knife to use, long or short?
I think for practical purposes, a smaller knife is good. You can easily carry it with you. You can conceal it. You may avoid legal trouble if you have a smaller size pocket knife. But ideally, the larger the blade, the more options you have. So in places where you're allowed to carry a larger knife, I would always carry a larger knife, definitely. And as far as the type of knife, I think if you're well trained, the type of blade that you're carrying is not going to be as important as how comfortable you are with it. You have to find what's a good match for you. Different personalities will gravitate towards different types of blades. Me personally, I like to carry a larger folding knife. So my personal favorite is the Cold Steel Voyager. I like it a lot, and some of the other knives from the Cold Steel Company are a good fit for me, for the way I like to use the blade and my personality. I'm okay with carrying a little bit of a larger blade, so that's my personal preference.
We have a lot of situations today when one person practicing working with a knife in gym for 3-5 years. But when he faced real situation on the street, he doesn't know what to do and just run away. Why does it happen?
It happens because of the lack of psychological preparation. Physically, that person probably knows all of the techniques and all of the movements that they have to know to make that knife function. But if they're not able to use it when they need to, it's because psychologically they have not been prepared. They probably were not inoculated to stress. They probably never, had that personal conversation with themselves that I mentioned earlier about accepting that they're going to use this weapon. I mean, the knife is a devastating, tool. It can do incredible amounts of damage. It's a lethal force tool. It's something that you can take another person's life very easily. Those things are not things that you should look at lightly. And it takes a commitment to say to oneself, I understand what it is, I will use it properly, and I'm willing to use it in the correct way, the moral, ethical, and legal way. But if you haven't really had that preparation, it will fail you. Your gym training will fail you if you have not prepared psychologically. That is what it is. It's not that, this system of knife work was no good because the person couldn't use it. Anybody can use a knife with very little training, physically. Mentally is a whole nother story, and you need to make that preparation in advance.
Mr. Vargas, how do you think? Why there exist a lot of teachers of knife fighting today?
I think there are a lot of teachers because there's high demand for knife training. People are starting to see the value in knife training. It's becoming more and more popular. There are more people putting forth different traditions as well. In the past, you were lucky if you found one or two traditions that you could train in, and now there's a plethora of traditions. People are taking, more to heart the efforts to maintain some of these much older traditions, and so they will put themselves out into the community more to promote them and to teach. And again, just back to basic supply and demand. There's a demand for knife training, and so there's a supply that's filled by people that are qualified to teach it. They put themselves out there to go ahead and help the community that wants their training.
What kind of tradition of knife fighting do you prefer? Philippines, Italian, Spanish?
I personally, I find, and for two reasons. One, it's most comfortable to me, and it fits my personality the best. And two, I find it to be more practical. But the arts that I would prefer to train the most are my foundation art, which is Native American, Apache style knife work. I think it's a great, practical foundation, very functional. And I also have a great and deep respect for the European blade traditions, both Spanish and Italian. I think that a lot of the most important information that I've ever found regarding knife work has come from the European tradition as well. And by and large, that European tradition influenced a lot of the Western military traditions, the older ones. And those are probably the areas of training that I like to partake in myself. I have found value in Filipino Kali and Indonesian Silat, and there are a lot of things that I borrowed from there, but those influences are much, much smaller. In my personal system, it's going to be Native American and European. By and large, that's what I focus on.
Can you tell me, please, how long are you teaching working with the knife?
How long have I been teaching knife? I've been teaching knife formally since around 2002.
Mr. Vargas, do you have some certain criteria according to which you can understand if one person is a master or not?
Okay. For me, I believe that a real master understands every aspect of their particular art. They can explain to you the biomechanics of what's going on, the psychology of what's going on in their discipline, and also the history. So a real master knows more than how to do something. They understand why it's being done. And they understand the culture of it, the history, the psychology, the mechanics, everything. Every facet of what they do, they really need to understand. The second thing is a real master, in my opinion, never stops learning. And that could be learning about their own system, just refining a new understanding of what they already had trained before, or training in other systems with other masters. But whether you go outside of your system or you stay within your system, there's still opportunities to constantly learn. Um, Before I began speaking with you ladies today, I was talking to a fellow knife instructor, and he was helping me to improve my knife throwing. Um, Not saying that I'm a master, but I try to always learn and get better at what I do, and so that's an aspect of training that has been less of a focus for me. And so I'm looking for the advice of qualified, good instructors to help me to better that area of training. And I think that's uh, a good trait for any practitioner to have, but especially any teacher or master of an art.
Mr. Vargas, do you have some history or tradition that have based in your system? How does it look?
My system is a new system. It started in my generation, so it doesn't have the same history as one combined art. But we do look at the aspects of what went into this art and this curriculum. So, I mentioned before, we want to look at things and understand how to do them, but also not only how, but also why you're doing it. So, my system is comprised of different elements, and we do look at the history of those elements independently. When we look at, for example, the Native American knife fighting, we try to understand why they did things the way they did. We look at their form of moving and the way that they engage with opponents. For example, in the Native American knife work that I was taught, you don't over focus on any one opponent. You don't sit and engage in a long match. You want to do damage to the opponent, lessen the threat or eliminate the threat, and you're continuously moving. And you're aware of your surroundings, you're aware of multiple attackers. That comes from the history of the Apache Indians in the United States. The Apaches were very, very fierce warriors. They were constantly fighting greater numbers of opponents. And so on the battlefield, they learned that at times they could not stay still and stagnant fighting with opponents because the sheer number of opponents would outnumber them quickly and cause their demise. They became very adept at constantly moving in odd directions, moving in different ways than non-linear movement. And they also developed some strategies as far as wounding opponents rather than killing opponents. That also comes from the multiple attacker. So when I look at the way we move in the way of the Raven system, a lot of our movement comes from the Apaches, and I understand that when I move and where I maybe am making an attack to injure or disable, it's done by design. I might not want to kill this person. When the Apaches were on the battlefield, they would come in, they would fight, and as an example, if you are fighting 4 soldiers and you kill 1 soldier, 3 soldiers will come run after you. If you wound 1 soldier, 1 or maybe 2 soldiers will stop to assist that person, carry them off the field, and you only have maybe 1 or 2 people come after you and chase you. So it was a very pragmatic way of fighting, and that's one example of the history. So in our system, we look at the borrowed history from the systems that comprised what we do here. So that's just kind of an example, looking at the Native American history.
How do you think? Does the knife have some future in 21st century?
I think that the knife has is future forever, not just in this century, but in every century that will ever come. I think as long as we have steel, and as long as we have the ability to, form an edge on some type of material, there will be a knife. Some weapons have lost their place in society. We don't see people carrying spears anymore. We don't see people carrying, large swords. But the knife has been with us from the very beginning. The knives are among the first tools that primitive man ever created, and a knife in one shape or another has always been a companion to man since the first time that we ever learned how to use it. And I think that that's how it's going to be for the rest of the existence of man. The knife is eternal. It will be with us as long as there are people. There will be knives.
What could you recommend to people that want to start working with a knife?
If you are serious about working with a knife, the first thing that you want to do is to find a qualified instructor. A lot of people claim to be instructors. I don't know what it's like where you ladies live, but in the United States, there are no regulations. Anybody can say, I'm an instructor, and they are an instructor. So you have to do your homework. You have to talk to people, to other, professional instructors and get information about the person that you might be going to train with. So that's the first step. Find a qualified instructor. If you cannot find a qualified instructor, find a qualified author. You can find DVDs or books written by qualified individuals who know their craft, that can give you good information. A lot of information can be learned that way. It doesn't mean that should be your only source of training, but it's a very good start to at least to learn and digest some of the basic principles and ideas regarding knife work. So definitely, Amazon is a great place to start. You can find some good authors there, and then you can start to try different books and see what approaches you see. Look at different DVDs, and that will help you to narrow down what type of knife work you want to do, and then help you to find an instructor in the community that's going to be credible and offer you legitimate training.